All right, in today's video we want to talk about how to actually transfer a beer from the Vessi Fermentor and Dispenser into a keg in case you don't want to wait until the entire beer is consumed before you start the next batch. If you want to reuse the vessel, one way to do it is to actually transfer the beer into a keg. So in order to do that, what you will need is a kit that you can order from a number that should be appearing on the screen right now. It essentially consists of two lengths of line, one for gas and one for liquid. You can tell them apart because the liquid connector will have the spring-loaded tip, and that's the one that will go into the beverage out port on the Vessi, whereas the other one that doesn't have the spring-loaded tip is the gas connector that goes into the CO2 out port on the Vessi. Now, the kit comes with just the connectors that you need to connect to the Vessi and the length of hose, and it terminates into 1/4-inch flare fitting type swivel nuts. What it does not come with is the actual posts that will go in a keg. So if you have any kegging experience, you know that typically for home brewers you will use a corny type keg, either a pin lock or a ball lock. We happen to have a ball lock here. And for those kegs, you know that you have the two disconnects, one gray for the gas in line and one black for the beer out line. The keg itself is marked. Typically most kegs will say in or out for the two different posts. And in this case, this is what this does. It says in for this post, so you know that this is the gas post, whereas this one says out. Now we have a word of caution. We will actually be using the liquid out or beer out port on the keg in order to fill it. So we'll be going kind of backwards. We'll be pulling liquid into the keg through the liquid out port. And that's kind of important so we don't mix them up, because although these look the same, they're not interchangeable, and they will get stuck on the post if you use the gray post on what is intended to be the liquid line and vice versa. First thing I'll do real quick is I will make sure that I have my gas line, and I will quickly thread the fittings on. Use a 9/16" wrench and tighten them. Make sure that it's nice and snug and tight. So gas gray is done. Next we will do the liquid line with a black post. Again, 9/16" wrench will do it. Okay, now with that done, the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we have a level of pressure in the keg. Right now it's at about 5-6 psi. That's good. What we want to do now is take the gas connector, which again is the gray connector, and we want to push that onto the gas in post on the keg. The way we would do that is we'll pull back on the spring-loaded ring, and I will push it in. And you can hear gas flowing into the keg. Now the next thing I'm going to do a couple times is on these kegs, you typically have a lid with a pressure relief ring. I will push up on that, say about 4 or 5 times, letting the gas supply catch up, just to make sure that we purge out the air and the oxygen from inside the keg, and we have CO2 in the keg. Now also remember, CO2 is heavier than air, so undisturbed, CO2 is always going to be the lower part of what's filling the keg, and therefore in contact with your beer instead of air and oxygen, which is what you want. Okay, in the meantime here, you've seen that through this process I've dropped the pressure into the vessel. I'm going to turn the vessel's pressure knob to pressurized Vessi. So now the vessel gets some pressure build up again. And I want to maintain throughout this process a few psi in the keg at this point. Okay. The next thing is we need to get now the beer out of the keg, or out of the Vessi and into the keg. Okay, now we have purged the air and oxygen out of the keg and replaced the contents with CO2. Now the next step is for us to go to the liquid line, connect that to the Vessi so the liquid can flow from the Vessi and into the keg. In order for that to happen, we have to have a higher pressure in the vesey, and we know what that is because we have that gauge here. So we need to have a higher pressure in the vesey than we do inside the keg. Also, as we're filling the keg, as the liquid level of the beer comes up in the keg, that needs to displace that extra space of gas on top of it, because otherwise it's building up a higher pressure in there than it's in here, and you would stop the flow. So in order to do that, one of the simple ways to do this is, now that we have the keg purged, like I said, is to remove the line, and it's a good idea to stick it into a container full of maybe, say, sanitizing solution, because doing so will create some bubbling, and you will see that gas is escaping. So now that the pressure is dying down, the bubbling will slow down as well. Okay, now we're ready to go into the liquid line. What we're going to do here is we're going to connect first the black post onto the liquid out terminal onto the beer keg. We're going to pull back on the ring, push down on the post until it locks into place, and then we're going to connect this port into the beverage out port on the vesey. Beer is going to start flowing because the pressure in here is higher than this. During the process, you want to make sure that this pressure stays up so you can keep the flow going, and as you need to, you can always top up the pressure by turning the knob back into the pressurized vessel position. Once you get full, once the keg is full, the flow of beer will stop, and you'll know that. If you happen to have more than 5 gallons of liquid in the vesey, what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing some foam and beer coming out of the gas port into your sanitizing solution. Then you know that your keg is now full.